Good evening, and welcome again to Facebook Live. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary talking to you as we're going to try to make an ordinary schedule of the Monday before Tuesday City Council meetings. I'd like to open up tonight by talking a little bit about some of the items that are on the agenda for tomorrow night. It's the second reading of a municipal income tax credit that has been discussed the last several weeks, and I believe is real important to get it passed sooner than later. There are some specific projects that the city has been working on, industrial projects that we think that the municipal income tax will be very helpful as an incentive to bring some new jobs to Galion. So that will be on the agenda for a second reading and possible suspension of the rules tomorrow night. The second item of note, I think, for everyone is the street paving ordinance that will be introduced tomorrow with an approximate a budget, an estimate of around $250,000, which is a little bit less than we've been able to fund the last several years. However, we're funding it early in the construction season, trying to get some of the worst sections of Galion City streets resurfaced earlier in the year. I think some of the viewers and listeners would be familiar with us being more doing paving in the end of the year, and I think that's been a step forward that we really intend to get that list out early this year. It's a little bit smaller, as I said before, but I think we'll take care of some of the key segments. Another thing that's really new this year is that we specifically went over at the committee level. A new council member, Councilman Earlston, had convened the Streets Committee, and Service Director Ward had presented the streets that had really bubbled up from the Service Department employees through the Superintendent of the Service Department, through the Mayor's office, and on to Council. So the list of streets, which I quite honestly don't have committed to memory, but that will be discussed at least for a first reading tomorrow night. So those two pieces of legislation moving ahead on the municipal income tax credit and then really getting our streets, the small street program, up bid and hopefully under construction before the heat of the summer. The other topic worth just introducing to viewers and listeners that will happen this week is Thursday morning, key meeting of the Planning and Financial Supervision Commission, which is the group that meets and really is composed of state officials as well as local officials. And the purpose of that group has been to oversee the fiscal recovery that we've been undergoing really candidly for quite too long. And so we're hoping Thursday there'll be a motion made at that meeting with a recommendation to remove Galion from fiscal emergency. So while that may not affect the everyday lives of Galionites, I can assure you from the point of view of city government that clearing this hurdle is a big step forward from the days when the city was in such financial problems, really getting stronger and moving ahead. So that'll happen Thursday, and we'll see how that proceeds, and certainly be in the news, as they say, later this week, particularly if we're moving ahead to be released. A recommendation, rather, going to the state auditor, who ultimately makes the decision to release us. So those are a couple things from tomorrow night's council meeting. I think a very important meeting Thursday night, and that's a little bit of what's going on in city government. I'm not sure if we have any questions, but that's really some introductory remarks.
Mayor, first question tonight comes from Mike. He says, residents by Covert keep smelling a moldy smell that's breathtaking. Depending on the direction of the wind, you can smell it all over town. Any way someone could look into what is causing this smell?
Yeah, there's that issue came up a week or 10 days ago. As soon as it came to our attention, building inspector went out and met with them, and from my understanding of that, there's a changeover in their machines, and they're working on reducing that odor. While I understand in the immediate neighborhood it's a problem, I think it's important to recognize two things. One, they're working on it, and the other thing is that this is a locally owned business that's providing a lot of vitality to the community. So we're aware of it and have spoken with them about it, and our understanding is that it's being corrected.
That's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay. Just one or two other items, and we'll wait for some more questions. On Wednesday of this week, we'll be going to Columbus in hopes of we're going to make a presentation. Our hope is it'll be favorably received, and we'll end up with a commitment from ODOT to help fund the widening or partially fund the widening of 598, really from the Arby's area on out to Route 30. As I think all of us realize that not only at the intersection of Brant Road and 598, but certainly along that corridor, there's a significant amount of increased traffic, and I think many of us expect and hope that you're going to see additional traffic and economic development in that corridor. So our plan is to move as fast as we can to secure funding to provide for a center turn lane, much as was added in the block just north of Portland Way and Harding Way intersection. So that's another item that we're going to be working on this week. On Wednesday of this week is Galion's presentation with people from ODOT in Columbus. So although that will move ahead piece by piece, I think each piece put in place will be important to us. So. Guess we have another question coming in, or
yeah, this question comes from Tom. Trains blocking Sherman Crossing more often lately. So I think he wants to know what's being done about the blocked crossings.
I think we talked about that a couple of Facebook Live sessions ago. It's not only the Sherman Street crossing, but certainly another one that is problematic and causes a lot of frustration and complaints are the South Boston crossing and the Portland Way South crossing. I think what's being done is that we've communicated with the state officials about our concerns about that, as well as the railroad. One of the things that happens is that along that very busy section of railroad here in Ohio, that we have two lines converging from two different directions, one from Columbus and one from Indianapolis, essentially, and they both come together just out by Atwood Street. And what is increasingly happens is those trains are moving up on that north-south line and being delayed, not for anything going on the highway, but being delayed because of the increased traffic along the railroad. So it begins with communicating with the railroad as we have, with the state officials as we have, and that we've also spoken with Galion's congressman, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, about the issue. And it's really a matter of starting the dialogue and being persistent in trying to get in this case, CSX Railroad more aware of our problem here in Galion and trying to do something about it. Last thing I'll say on this is that while it is very frustrating and at times unsafe for people in cars and in trucks at these intersections, it's important to remember that they have the right-of-way, and so we're fighting an uphill battle to try to encourage them not to block the crossings. Our ability to fine them and penalize the road is very limited based on a recent federal court ruling. So I know that's not the answer that Tom wants to hear necessarily, but it's a difficult answer that we're going to have to stay engaged and hopefully get the process to work for us.
Mayor, our next question comes from Eric. He'd like just a brief rundown of the depot public meeting from week before last, just regarding kind of what the city intends to do.
Right. Well, the public meeting, which I understand was well attended, I was unable, I had a schedule conflict, was unable to be there, but had approximately 36 people. We got feedback. I think for those folks who are proponents of redeveloping the depot property, we, for the first time since I've been mayor, really have a firm number that we expect would be the cost of renovating and bringing the old depot back into service. For those people who aren't big fans of doing something about it, they now have a couple million reasons to complain about what we think the estimated cost is. So really the next step now is to continue to get feedback on the proposed idea, and for advocates of the depot, Friends of the Depot and Galion Depot Inc. To work with the city to identify additional tenants and really make this idea of a museum space, not only for Galion historical items, but certainly for a children's museum, particularly on the second floor, to make that vision or those ideas a reality. But we do have a price tag, and now we're going to begin the process of identifying sources of revenue to begin the incremental renovation of the property. I would say that this year one can hope that can expect certainly that we'll replace the roof in the areas that it's damaged or in bad repair, and move forward to try to do as much as we can to replace the many broken windows that are out. That I think is for this year, 2018. Maybe some spot painting. Those three items are just about all that one can expect. And really the funding and the major renovation for air conditioning and new electrical, new plumbing, those sorts of things, those are really start to take shape in 2019.
Mayor, next question tonight comes from Dee. She would like to know, is there any new interest in the former school site properties, namely the former Wrenchville and the high school?
Well, those are in private property. One is Wrenchville is owned by private owner, and the high school is definitely in a better shape. That's owned by the school. I believe that both of those properties have interested owners, both the school property at the old high school in Wrenchville, as well as the other elementaries have, except for Doss, had motivated and has an owner and a plan. Those other elementary school properties, I think, are ideal for residential development, and that's our goal over the next several weeks and months, is to use tax credits and begin to try to encourage residential development on those now, to a certain extent, unused facilities or unused lots.
Mayor, jumping back to the depot for a moment, Kim would like to know, is this museum going to be targeted for all citizens, even those who are handicapped?
The depot property, is that the question? Yeah, that is part of the plan. Anything that we're going to use for public use will need to be handicap accessible, and that's part of the plan. It's part of what's figured into the cost of it. One of the big expenses, as sometimes say, big ticket items, will be how to handle an elevator, either a small elevator, and I don't really have the term. There's a sort of term in the industry for a single person elevator. So what's that, Matt?
Lula.
A Lula. All right, so Matt's on top of that, and a Lula, either a small one like that, but I think we want to be able to make the second floor, particularly if we're going to make it a children's facility, we want to make it so that the children's grandparents and young people who maybe have a little bit of limitations in how they get around, that they'd be able to use the facility as well. So those are some of the things that we're going to look at, both in accessing the property on the first floor, but certainly making sure that the property is accessible to folks once we get the museum up and running.
Mayor, shifting gears here, Jerry would like to know any word on a new track and facility being built. I know the running track we have now in the park needs to be repainted and resurfaced. Do you plan on resurfacing it or just going to building a new track?
Well, that's a good question, and sometime in the future we'll have Superintendent Jim Grubbs and Athletic Director Kyle Bond to kind of come in here and join us. Or when they do some Facebook Live items, it's a great question for them. Where I can see us participating, and we just received from the school about 2 weeks ago what they would really consider a 5-phase plan for parks improvements. And from what I understand, and just looking over that their initial efforts are to get their soccer field put in place, and then in more of a second phase would begin to look at the funding of a new track, and so whether or not there's a need to resurface the existing track in the interim, that's really, again, more of a school question. But I would say it's good to see a prioritization from the schools. And and I think what we'll be doing over the next several years is incorporating their park and recreation part, their athletic department requests, incorporating those into freeze requests, and trying to meet the needs of the parks and the needs of other groups that utilize the parks, but also keep an open ear to the kinds of things the school's going to need to invest in over the next handful of years.
Mayor, next question comes from Dee. The former Elliott Machine Works on Wrench has recently been sold. Are you aware of what's next in store for this site?
Yeah, we've been. No, I'm not. And to be quite honest, I didn't know it had been sold. It's got to be good news. I think that the facility, hopefully, the property, hopefully will be utilized in a reuse other than manufacturing. It's real sort of an odd property now, particularly now that the school's gone, and it sits in the middle of a residential area. So, I'll be honest with you, that's the first I'd heard. I know that we've been working with some of the previous tenants who are interested in perhaps opening up a new business in the region, and so we've been talking a little bit with some of the previous operators, but I'll be honest, that's the first I'd heard that the property had sold.
That's all the questions we have for tonight.
Well, that's great. That's a great one to end up on. The mayor doesn't know what's going on with every property, but that's a good question. Again, if you know the neighborhood and you know the difficulty that's been and the kind of conflict it's been with the otherwise wonderful residential neighborhood, it's something for us to get on first thing tomorrow. So really appreciate the questions and the attendance tonight, and we're going to continue to work hard on your behalf. And tomorrow night, City Council meeting, street allocation, municipal income tax, and there's always other surprises in store. So thanks a lot. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.